Hello, welcome to the Bible IT training video, section 3, module 2 of the 7680 Configuring Windows 7 exam series. Today we're going to be having a look at configuring application compatibility. So application compatibility is what you need to look at if you've got legacy programs that won't run on the new version of the operating system. Why is it normal for things not to necessarily be 100% compatible? Well, you find moving between operating systems that quite often the fundamental architecture, the way that Windows behaves in certain circumstances will change. That might be due to increased security or other changes that have been made. An example that's given is with Windows 2000 or XP, I think it might have been, the sort order for a list of numbers would have gone 1, 1, 0, 1, 1, 1, 2, then 2, 2, 1, 2, 2, etc., rather than the numeric sort you'd expect of going 1, 2, 3, 4, then 10, 11, 12, etc. So that might cause problems to your application. It might also be themes, the way that the program is trying to display, fonts, all those sorts of things. Another quite common problem might be your application has been hard-coded to expect certain things returned by the operating system. For example, if your program does a check against the operating system version, it might be coded in that it's to expect 5 or less, which means that it will get back from 7 or Windows Vista version string of 6 something. So your program, even though it might very well carry on and not complain, it might actually work, would stop at that point and say, error, this is the wrong operating system that's installed. Or another one is when programs run with administrator rights or expect you to be running them with admin rights. It might well be that your program's been coded in the days before UAC, user account control, that was introduced with Vista, which lets programs that need admin rights prompt for it and then get elevated appropriately. If your program's not UAC aware, it might just fail and stop working because it needs administrator rights, but it's not telling Windows that it needs to be run with admin rights. So there are several tools that we can use to help us get around some of these problems. The first two here, Program Compatibility Troubleshooter and Windows Compatibility, they're two things that are built into Windows. This one is the main one that I'll show you first, and then the troubleshooter is a way that Windows wraps that up for normal users to try and catch kind of 9 out of 10 of the most common places that you'd experience compatibility issues. Then there's a full-blown suite of tools called ACT, Microsoft Application Compatibility Toolkit, that allows administrators to deploy agents on client machines and gather information about what sort of programs are installed out in their environment. It also lets you centrally manage fixes so that if you've got an application that needs certain things put in place for it to function properly, you can do that from a central location and distribute those out to all your clients so they will pick up the right settings and the program will run without affecting the user. And finally, there's this thing called XP mode, which is a full-on solution for if you're getting no joy at all with any of these kind of fudges that Windows lets you do out the box. So first, let's have a look at the Program Compatibility Troubleshooter. The Program Compatibility Troubleshooter is something built into Windows. It will run automatically if it detects a fatal error in an application that you're trying to run, or you can run it manually if you're having problems with a specific application. It's not necessarily very customizable. It makes a best guess at what it thinks your program needs in order to run, and you're only able to run it against exes. You can't run it against other types of programs or set up MSI installers, for example. Before I show you that, I'm actually going to show these next two together. We've got the built-in Windows compatibility options. These are what the troubleshooter sets for you. Again, you set these up per exe. The main reason you'd want to use this is it changes the operating system that's reported back to the application. There's quite a lot of choices in there. You can choose, for example, XP Service Pack 2, Service Pack 3, so you've got quite a large range. It's not just the operating system, but also the service pack level that you can specify. You can also change things about the way the program displays, so if you want to force it to use 256 colors or not to interact with Windows themes, that sort of stuff. You can also force an application to run as administrator, and once you're happy with your changes, if you're working on a shared computer, you can apply those to all users so that not everyone has to set it up individually. So if I quit out here and have a look on my desktop, I've got a program here, CPU ID. This is a little program that does work quite happily in Windows 7, but the one I want to show you here, if we look in the About tab, at the moment you can see the version of Windows it thinks it's running on is Windows 7. So if I right click on that and bring up the properties and go to compatibility, these are the built-in Windows compatibility options. Now I can say and choose here that I want to actually run this and tell the application that I'm using XP Service Pack 2, and down here you can see some of these graphic options, or mainly graphic options that you can set, so things like 256 color, limit the screen resolution, etc. Well, the program already knows that it needs to run as an administrator because we got that prompt before, so I'm going to leave that alone, apply, OK, and rerun my application. And hopefully this time on the About tab you'll see here that it's now reporting that it's running on Windows XP Media Center Edition Professional, apparently, Service Pack 2. So now I'll show you the troubleshooter. This is a little program that Microsoft produced specifically to demo an application that doesn't work correctly and how you can implement fixes to get around it. So if I open up Stock Viewer here, you can see first of all I'm getting a warning telling me that I need to be an admin to run it. Click on OK. And if we look around, if I click in here, I get varying errors as I go through saying that certain stuff isn't working. Now, hopefully, if I close this, I'm going to get a little prompt from Windows, there we go, saying that it's detected that this did not run correctly and that I've tried to make some fixes to it. If I click on close and run it again, you see I'm still getting the prompt about an administrator, but if I do help and about, I'm getting a UAC prompt now, and even though this doesn't actually work, you can see that I've got further through the application than I was before. So Windows has had a good guess about what it needs there. If I close that and close it again, I can actually supplement this manually by adding in that I also want to run this program as an admin. So if I click OK there, run it again, you can see we now get the prompt at the start, yes I want to run it as an admin, and click on Help and check for updates, and you can see that now my updating is working. And also if we go back into our options menu, again that is now working correctly because the program was expecting to be run as an admin, and that's what we're now doing. And we're also reporting that we're the correct version, well, the right version of the operating system that the program is expecting for it to run correctly. So we'll just take that back off because I'm going to use the same program in a minute for the other thing. The other way you can run that troubleshooting tool, if I run troubleshooting from the start menu, then I've got the option here, run programs made for previous version of Windows, and it'll go through search on my computer for a list of applications. Lets me choose which one I think I'm having problems with, so Stock Viewer, if that's in the right location, yes it is. And then I've got some choices here. I can either let Windows choose what it thinks is best, or I can go through and specifically troubleshoot, based on what I've seen about the program. So it opens but it doesn't display properly, it wants some additional permissions, and it worked in a previous version of Windows. What version of Windows did it work in? XP Service Pack 3, and then this is basically just walking us through all those other options that we had. Let's start the program and see where we get to. So we've got our UAC prompt, and everything's still not quite right. So obviously there's a few other things that need doing. But we'll leave that troubleshooting wizard there. Hopefully you get the idea. Incidentally, if you want to, while you're testing any of these, remove any of these settings that you've put for an application, if you open the registry up and go and have a look in current user, software, Microsoft, Windows NT, current version, app compat flags, then you've got these three keys here. Layers, you can see I've got my Stock Viewer application, and in Compatibility Assistant I've also got my Stock Viewer application. So I'm just going to delete those out of there, which means that all my settings will be restored back to default for this program. So next we're going to have a look at the Application Compatibility Toolkit, or ACT. ACT introduces this term called shims. A shim is something that sits between the operating system and the application, and it intercepts calls made by the application to the operating system, and then it emulates the way the previous or older versions of the operating system would have responded. So it deals with interacting between the shim and the OS, and the application is actually talking to the shim rather than talking direct to the operating system. So ACT provides an easy way of managing these shims and bundling them up into a package suitable for whatever your programs are. As I said before, you can collect data from all your workstations so that you can analyze what you've got out there, so you know if you've got lots of problems that you need to work through or there's not very many users using legacy programs. It includes two tools that also help you slightly further. There's a standard user analyzer that lets you run a program that's expecting admin rights, and then it tells you what that program's actually trying to do and why it requires administrator rights, and then it lets you feed that back into the main ACT program so that it can come up with a collection of these shims that will let that program function, or hopefully let the program function. And then lastly, we've got Internet Explorer compatibility test tool, because let's not forget, quite a lot of companies have custom applications or custom intranets that run via the web browser. So within Windows XP you had Internet Explorer 6, with Vista you had 7, with Windows 7 you've got Internet Explorer 8, and there's quite significant differences between the way those websites A handle security, and B between the way they render different pages. So you might well find that once you've sorted out your actual programs, you've got problems with any web applications. So let's take a look at ACT. So in my Start menu, I've installed this. To install it, it does require a SQL database. All I've done for that, because I don't have full-blown SQL running on this virtual machine, is I've downloaded from Microsoft the SQL Server Express, which is a free edition of SQL that you can install for little databases as and when you need them. So if we have a look, first of all, in the Application Compatibility Manager, as that fires up. I'm not going to go into too much detail with ACT. I'm just going to cover the basics of what you need to know for compatibility. This is where you'd come to view reports of all the information that's been collected from your different workstations, and you'd be able to list what applications have been installed, what devices they've got, and it's going to flag up if it finds that there's programs that aren't working correctly, or things that it knows about from, because it's got actually quite a large database of programs that it knows don't work or knows need fixes. So this is where you'd pull all that information together, but the bit we're interested in for today is this one, Compatibility Administrator. So if we open that up and have a look here, these are a list of all the applications that Windows already knows about as being faulty or not working correctly without some sort of fudging from these things called shims. So you can see here we've got things like 102 Dalmatians Activity Center, that it's emulating some missing exe files, and that these are the types of thing that it looks for to then run this compatibility fix. If we have a look down through here, you can see there's all sorts of stuff in here: 3D Studio Max, 3D Mark, quite a lot of games from the looks of things, Azurus, a torrenting program, Barbie Cool Fashion Designer, phew, I'm glad they fixed that one. Yeah, etc. You get the idea. So for all of these, you can see the different fix that's being applied, and then how it knows what program it needs to apply the fix for. So if we close Applications and expand Compatibility Fixes, these are the lists of shims that you can use to build up whatever your compatibility requirements are. So things like different API calls. We've got a little description down here. I think there's somewhere to emulate sorting by Windows Vista, so you can see the different calls that this program might be making to the operating system, and if we've implemented this shim, they will be returned in the style that Vista would have returned rather than Windows 7. Enable DEP, turn on data execution prevention, run as an administrator, run as highest level privilege, all these sorts of things. You can see there's a huge set of things, even basic things like XP SP1 version lie. That means when the program asks what version are you using, the get version this shim will reply and say I'm Windows XP Service Pack 1 rather than Windows 7. So Here we've got our new database of fixes that we want to apply. This is where we're going to pull everything together for all the programs we've got installed on our computer, and then we can push them out, save them, and install them on different machines. So the other tool that I mentioned, which is going to actually tell us what we need to do with this, if we look under Developer and Tester Tools, we've got this Standard User Analyzer. If we run this, and then we're going to choose our application that we want to test, so in our case our stock viewer application again, and then we're going to launch it. Yes, don't care about our logs from before. So because I had the little tick box saying run elevated, we've got our UAC prompt. Got it twice, once for this and once for the program that we're actually running. And if I click through some of these, if I go into my options and if I go into my updates and then close our application down, we get a little report back saying what this program needed to do. So if we look in files, these are all the places that this has tried to write on the hard drive that would have needed privilege. If we look in the registry, you can see it's tried to create some keys in local machine software, which it won't be able to do unless it was elevated. If we look at token, you can see that this program has checked to see if the current user is in the built-in administrators group. So again, these are all things that are pointing to this wanting to run with elevated privilege. If we go to mitigation and apply mitigation, and it's going to give us a list of recommended things that it thinks need to be forced, or these shims that we need to put in for this program to work correctly. We're going to apply all of those, go back into our compatibility administrator, and you can see we've now got this new section, installed databases. So these are all the custom shims that have been created on this computer. If we have a look under our application, you can see here, this is our stockviewer.exe. And these are the things that Windows are going to run automatically for us. We've got elevate privilege, force admin access, some stuff about mapping different objects, and we've got the same here for the update exe as well. So we can copy those out and paste them into our new custom database once we've tested them, and then we can save that and get it ready for distribution to our client machines. So hopefully with that installed now, if we go back and run our stock viewer application, you can see we haven't been prompted for admin access with UAC. If we do tools and options, we're getting a message back that we don't have any options, but we're not getting the error this time. And if we do help and check for updates, keep our fingers crossed. We've got our updates running. Now we've actually still got a compatibility issue here because this program is expecting some commands to come through from this program here, and because they're running with different privilege, they're not talking to each other correctly. So we would need to carry on and do some further troubleshooting with that. But hopefully you get the idea about how this works. Okay, so the other tool that I mentioned was the Internet Explorer troubleshooting. If we look again in our Developer and Tester Tools, we've got Internet Explorer Compatibility Test Tool. If we open that up and enable it, if we then open up Internet Explorer, it should hopefully hook in and start recording what's going on. So as we browse to Microsoft.com, you can see here we're starting to get some stuff being pulled back through into here. Now these aren't necessarily things that are definitely going to cause problems, it's just flagging areas where it thinks there might be a possible issue. As you can tell, the Microsoft website has actually rendered correctly, as you'd expect it to with their own browser. If we have a look in here, it's saying that there's possibly some CSS issues, there's possibly an issue about the way it's handling the MIME types, there's some standards mode had to be engaged for the analytics script that's on that page. So this is just flagging up areas of potential problems. It's probably more useful when you know you've got a compatibility issue with a website. You can run this and have a look at what's actually going on and try and work out what this problem specifically is. Okay. Okay, so as a last resort, we've got this thing called XP mode. XP mode is pretty much able to guarantee full Windows XP compatibility, and it's able to do that because it runs the application inside a fully featured copy of Windows XP. In order to do that, you need to have hardware virtualization on your computer, so that means you need to have one of the newer processors that's got virtualization extensions as part of them, and make sure they're enabled in the BIOS. You also need to have Windows 7 Professional or higher. The applications that you install on the version of Windows XP show up in the user start menu, and when the user clicks and runs them, it actually uses RDP, the remote desktop protocol, to display that in a seamless window on the user's desktop. It does full drive mapping, which means that when a user saves something in their My Documents inside the Windows XP virtual machine, it's actually mapping that through to be wherever their My Documents are in the Windows 7 computer. So it's fairly seamless to the user. To show you this working, I can't show it inside my Windows 7 machine because it itself is a virtual machine. But if you have a look here, this is what it looks like. I've got a full installation of Windows XP. You do need to make sure that you patch it and keep it up to date. It's up to you if you run antivirus on that as well. There's some disagreement around what best practice is for that. If you're doing it in enterprise, you probably would want to, but it does cause extra load on your computer. If I go ahead and install this application, my Notepad application, when I cross that off in the corner and it hibernates that virtual machine back, what XP mode then does is it looks at the start menu, sees what programs have been installed, and it fills this in on my main computer. So if I now, off camera, run that application, you can see that it opens up this preparing to launch window. What it's actually doing is in the background, it's resuming that XP machine from sleep, from hibernation. Okay, I've left it logged in, never mind. And then it runs the program that I've selected for me and displays it in this window. So there we go. This is my copy of Notepad++ running inside Windows XP. You can probably tell that it's XP because I've got the standard XP Chrome around the edges here. If I do File and Save As, you can see that I've got all my drives mapped through, and if I click on My Documents, it shows you my Documents. If I cancel out of that, one of the other quite clever things, if I drag this down from the top, it's brought through the language bar that Windows XP's put up. And also, if I was to show you my Windows 7 system tray, I'd have the Windows XP security alerts showing up in the tray. So it's not just the main application that the RDP window is limited to. It's anything that it thinks is relevant to the program that you're running, or anything that's popped up. It will put in the right places in the system to match it up as best it can. If I close that off, it gets rid of the application, hibernates the virtual machine in the background for me, and that's it. That obviously works really well where you've got a program that there's no way you can implement any of these shims, these compatibility fixes for. The slight problem to that is it works great if there's maybe 10 users in your organization who need to have this, but you can imagine that it's quite a pain if you've got any more than that, having to go and install, well, you don't have to install a copy of Windows XP, it does that as part of the download for XP mode, but you would need to patch it, configure your antivirus, join it to the domain if you want it on the domain. You need to install the application, configure whatever your custom application is. So Microsoft produced a tool called MEDV, which is part of their Microsoft Desktop Optimization Toolkit, or MDOP. MEDV is a way of doing this for enterprises where you create centralized Windows XP or Windows Vista or legacy operating system images that you can then deploy out to your clients. They will notice if there's an update available for what they have, and download the bits that have changed. And then you can configure centrally what shortcuts appear for the users if it's on their desktop, on their start menu. Different groups of users might get different applications inside your Windows XP instance. So MEDV is the way of doing it for enterprises. MEDV also, I don't think, doesn't require hardware virtualization. So again, it might suit organizations where they haven't necessarily got newer hardware. But there is a price to that because MDOP isn't free. It's licensed on a per user basis and you need to have software assurance. But that's out of the scope of what we're talking about today. So in summary then, if you get problems with legacy applications, there are several things you can do. There's the built-in compatibility tools with Windows XP, or if you need to take it a step further, there's the ACT Application Compatibility Toolkit. If you get really stuck, there's full-on virtualization using XP mode. But the key thing to all of this is make sure you test your programs. Before you consider any sort of a Windows 7 deployment, you need to put a few desktops together, install all your normal applications, and get people to test it to make sure that everything's okay. So thank you very much for listening, and hopefully catch up with you soon. Thank you. Bye.